All right. So just before we get started, can everybody see my screen, which has a big picture of a heart on it?
Yep.
Yep. And we've all got it here. Okay, fantastic. So I just need to just explain a little bit of heart anatomy first, because this is a lot of the first couple of questions just relate to this. Okay. Stay with me, guys. I know this is tough. This is anatomy and physiology. I've done too many hours of this. I've been so bored, but you've got to kind of try and wrap your head around it sometimes. So what we're looking at here is the heart. Okay. Now, there's two important things to look at the heart. Obviously, what we're looking at it looks like it's back to front because the blue side says R, which means it's actually the right side of the heart, okay? And then the red side is the left side of the heart, okay? So the heart actually has two specific jobs, all right? Everything on the blue side of the heart, which is the right side of the heart, remember we were looking at the heart from back to front, okay? So if that was in my chest, it would be the right side of the heart. Blue means blood that has no oxygen. Okay, so what we've done, we've taken all the blood out of that oxygen by our muscles and by our organs and by our tissues, and then we're taking it through the right side of the heart. That blood has to get pumped to the lungs, okay, because when we pump the blood to the lungs give us oxygen, okay? The left side of the heart, which is red, that's the blood that has oxygen. We call that oxygenated blood. And we're going to pump that blood to the rest of the body, out through that big vessel called the aorta there, okay? So just as you wrap your head around this and you have a look at that image that you've got on your notes as well, the blue side of the heart is what we call deoxygenated blood. So that blood's got to go to the lungs. The left side of the heart, the red side, has oxygenated blood. That blood's got to go back to the rest of the body, okay? So that's how we kind of explain this, all right? So let's have a look at some of these terms. Okay, so the first one, I'll also bring up your one here. Okay, so number one there, okay, the big vessel in our heart is called the aorta, A-O-R-T-A, the aorta, okay? Very important blood vessel. It's the biggest, thickest blood vessel in our body. With good reason, because its job is to pump oxygenated blood, so blood that has oxygen in it, to the upper and lower parts of the body. Okay, so it's a really important blood vessel. It's got to be strong. It's got to work well. It can't have any leaks. It can't have any blockages or anything like that. Bad things will happen, okay? So that's called the aorta. It pumps blood from the left side of the heart to the whole body, okay? The top part of the aorta, as you can see up the top here, will pump to, say, your head and your neck and your shoulders and your arms. And then you can see at the back of the heart down the bottom, that'll pump down to your stomach and your abdomen, your ribs and your legs and all that sort of stuff. Okay. Number two is what we call the superior, because it's at the top of the heart, yeah? Vena cava, V-E-N-A, C-A-V-A. Okay, so the role of these veins, because they're blue, vena cava, is they're bringing blood that has no oxygen back to the heart, okay? So number two, the role of it is to bring deoxygenated blood, yeah, from the upper body into the right side of the heart. So imagine all the blood in your head, neck, shoulders, chest, arms that has no oxygen in it, okay? That big, thick venous blood, that's going to come back through number two, okay? And then you can see there, it kind of attaches into the back of the right side of the heart there, okay? So if number two is the superior vena cava, then number 8 would be the inferior vena cava.
You say number 8?
Yeah, number 8. See, can you see it down the bottom there? Yeah?
Yeah.
So I'm going to work a little bit out of order just so we can kind of understand what's going on, yeah? So if number 2 is the superior vena cava, number 8 is the inferior. Again, inferior meaning below, vena cava. And its job would be to take deoxygenated blood from the lower body and bring it back to the right side of the heart. Okay, so imagine you're cycling up a hill, you know, you're pumping blood to your quads, The quads have taken all the oxygen away of that blood, and now it's being pumped back up through your veins, back up through that big vein into your heart. That's called the inferior vena cava. Very good. Okay, so the next one I'm going to explain, guys, is 5. Okay, because what 5 is where both of those blood vessels drain into. Okay, and 5 is what we call the right atrium. I've heard that before. A-T-R-I-U-M, atrium. So atrium just means the top chamber of the heart. Okay, so the role of the atrium, okay, the job of it is to pump deoxygenated blood, again, blood that has no oxygen in it, to the right ventricle. That's its job. All it needs to do is take the blood from the top of the heart and pump it down into the bottom of the heart.
What was that last one?
So pumping deoxygenated blood, yep, to the right ventricle. Ventricle is spelled V-E-N-T-R-I-C-L-E, right ventricle. Okay, so guys, what number do you think the right ventricle is on this, on your notes here? Can anyone tell me? What number would the right ventricle be?
7. 4.
7. 7. It would be 7. Can you guys see 7 down the bottom there? Yeah, with the line that comes across into the right ventricle there. That's the bottom chamber of the heart.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Now see how that bottom. So number 7 is the right ventricle. Okay. Number 5 is the right atrium. Number 7 is the right ventricle. Now the ventricles are really important because what they do is they're the ones that really squeeze that blood to the lungs or to the others or to the rest of the body. Okay. So when you think of a heartbeat like ba-dum, 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 think of the first bar, like the first sound being the top part of the heart, and then the second sound being the bottom part of the heart, ba-dum. So it's like push, 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 push. That's how it works, okay? Top part of the blood, heart goes, bottom part of the heart goes, okay? So the role of the right ventricle is to pump deoxygenated blood to the lungs, okay? So that's the role of that chamber of the heart. We've got to get that blood back to the lungs so the lungs can give it oxygen, okay? So that's number 7, pumps deoxygenated blood back to the lungs. All right. So what happens is the blood goes to the lungs, okay, goes to that alveoli that we talked about before, okay? It takes the oxygen from the alveoli, and then now what it's got to do, it's got to bring that blood back into the heart, okay? So you can see here, there are these 2 red arrows on either side of the heart here. One's number 3, that's from the right lung. The other one's coming from the left lung. So number 3 is what we call the right pulmonary artery. Okay, so I know this is a bit of a, we just got to know it. Sorry, pulmonary veins. That's my mistake. Sorry, guys. Right pulmonary, P-U-L-M-O-N-A-R-Y, veins, V-E-I-N-S, veins, okay? So the job of those, number 3, okay, is bringing blood back from the lungs to the heart, okay, from the right lung specifically. So number 3 would be to return oxygenated blood from the right lung back to the heart. And you can see that there are some on the left side as well. Okay, so that's number 3. Okay, so if number 5 was the right atrium, what's number 4, everyone?
Left.
Yeah, left atrium, exactly right. Okay, so the job of the left atrium, its job is to pump blood to the left ventricle. Okay, and then the left ventricle, I think, is the only one that we've got left over, which is number 6. Okay, so that's number 6. So number 4, role of the left atrium is to pump blood to the left ventricle. And then number 6, the role of the left ventricle, it's probably the most important part of the heart, is to pump oxygenated blood through the aorta to the rest of the body. Okay, so that's your big workhorse. That's the biggest part of your heart, that number 6, big chamber, because its job is to take all that blood that's red and full of oxygen and punch it right through the rest of your body. Okay.
Put the fucking, what's it called on?
So what we'll do, guys, let me just explain one more thing, just so that you guys can just get a little bit more of an understanding of these bottom chambers of the heart, okay? So you can see how these bottom chambers of the heart are really thick and muscled, yeah? It has to be, okay? Because those muscles are what provide the squeezing nature of the bottom chambers of the heart, okay? And they're really important, right? They can get too thick though, okay? I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this before. There's a condition called like athlete's heart, where the left ventricle gets too big and too thick. And when that muscle actually gets too thick, then the heart can't squeeze properly. And, you know, you hear all these terrible stories about like young athletes, you know, there are soccer players that have a heart attack and they're like 23 and they have a heart attack at training or whatever. And because they've been undiagnosed with this really thick left wall of their heart, right? So the heart's a very interesting muscle. You want the heart to be big. A bigger heart is better. The heart will actually grow in size as you train, okay? But what you don't necessarily want are the muscles in the heart to get too thick, okay? Because the thicker those muscles in the side of your heart get, the harder it is to squeeze all the blood out of your heart. And then if blood sticks around in the heart, that's where it pulls and you get blood clots. And then a blood clot can go to the brain, you have a stroke, a blood clot can go back into the body, you can have, you know, deep vein thrombosis, or it can go back to the heart, you can have a heart attack, yeah? So it's one of those things very interesting where a heart is bigger is good, but thicker muscles isn't actually necessarily a good thing, okay, with the heart, all right? Okay, so identify and name, explain the function of 4 heart chambers in relation to circulation. All right, guys, this is a really easy one. What you can do for 5.2 is just literally take your answers for 4, 5, 6, and 7, and you can copy and paste them back down there, yeah? Because we've already understood and explained what's going on there, yeah? So you just take your 4, 5, 6, and 7, because we already know what the 4 heart chambers do. Yep. So we've got the left atrium, the right atrium, the left ventricle, and the right ventricle. So you could literally just copy paste those and whack those straight down into 5.2, I reckon. Is everyone okay there? We're all okay to move on to 5.3. Anybody got any issues here? Just having a look through. We're all okay? Yep. Getting through to 5. Okay, great. 5.3. Here we go. Okay. So 5.3 now, what we're doing is we're explaining the role of blood in each of the 3 circulatory pathways listed below. Okay, now, okay, so the first one is pulmonary circulation. Okay, so I think we have explained this before, but let's have a think about it again. Okay, so this is pulmonary, means the lungs. So this is how is the blood traveling to the lungs and then coming back. Okay, so you can see on the dot points here on my slides, this is what happens. Okay, so the deoxygenated blood, remember the blood that has no oxygen in it, is pumped from the right ventricle into the lungs. Okay, so that would be the first step here. So you can do this in bullet point, that's fine, yeah? Okay, so deoxygenated blood pumped from the right ventricle, RV, you can even write RV, to the lungs. Okay, so the blood's going to the lungs, the blood's got no oxygen in it. Okay, 2 things happen at the lungs, well, specifically at the alveoli. The first thing is we give carbon dioxide, which is CO2, yeah? We give that from the blood to the alveoli because remember that blood that's deoxygenated has carbon dioxide in it. We need to breathe that out, okay? So carbon dioxide passes from the blood to the alveoli and we breathe that out. And then obviously then we take the oxygen from the alveoli and we put it back into the blood. Okay, so that's what we call, that's actually respiration. All right, so carbon dioxide from the blood to the alveoli and then oxygen from the alveoli into the blood. And then the blood's got oxygen. So then it's got to come back from the lungs into the left side of the heart. Okay? By the left atrium or the left ventricle. You can just write it comes back to the left side of the heart. Okay? All right, so that's what we call pulmonary circulation. All right, so that's the first one. Okay, so that's how we're pumping. So because there's basically 3 different areas that we need to pump blood to. The first one is the heart, the lungs. The second one is what we call coronary circulation. So this is the heart muscle itself. So not only is the heart pump blood, it also needs blood to work. That makes sense, right? Because every muscle in our body needs blood. Okay. So on top of the blood, on top of the heart, you've got a selection of arteries and blood vessels that run on top of the heart that allow the heart to contract and squeeze. So we need to pump to those as well. Okay. So what we do is coronary circulation is oxygenated blood is pumped to the coronary arteries that supply the heart muscle. Okay, so we're pumping blood now from the left side of the heart to the top of the heart, on top of the heart, where all the coronary arteries are. Coronary meaning heart. Okay.
Can you repeat that, sorry, mate?
Yeah, sure, mate. Yep. So oxygenated blood, okay, is pumped from the left ventricle to the coronary arteries. The coronary arteries are what gives the heart muscle blood flow. Okay. Can everyone see my slides up on my thingo here, on my computer? Okay, so that's that first part, okay? And then just like a normal muscle, what we'll do is we'll give oxygen to the muscle, okay? And then we'll take away carbon dioxide. Okay, so oxygen passes from the blood into the heart muscle cells, and then carbon dioxide passes back from the cells back into the blood. That's what happens at every single muscle. When we pump blood to a muscle, we give it oxygen and we take back carbon dioxide. Okay?
Can you say that one more time, please?
Sure, definitely. Yep. So the first thing is, okay, first step, oxygenated blood pumped from the left ventricle to the coronary arteries. Second step, oxygen passes from the blood into the heart muscle cells. Okay, so the oxygen goes into the cells of the heart muscle. And then the third step would be the carbon dioxide passes from the muscle cells back to the blood. Okay, just like what happened in the lungs with the alveoli, this time it's happening in the heart muscle cells. And then the last step, if you can see here with the notes, is making sure that I'm sharing the right screen. It might be better. Deoxygenated blood returns back to the right side of the heart. Okay, so now the blood has no oxygen and it's got to get back to the right side of the heart. Okay, so that's what we call coronary circulation. So that's circulation to the heart itself. And then the last one, okay, the last one, is everyone okay moving on to the last one? Any questions here?
No.
Okay, the last one is what we call systemic circulation. This is probably the easiest one to understand. This is just blood running through the whole body, through the whole system, okay? So I'll give you probably 3 different bullet points here to kind of focus on. So the same thing, starts with oxygenated blood is pumped from the left side of the heart. Yeah, oxygenated blood pumped from the left side of the heart to the entire body. Okay, and then the second step would be oxygen passes into cells depending on their need, and I'll explain that in a second. Okay, oxygen is delivered into cells depending on their need. Yep. Carbon dioxide is taken out of cells back into the bloodstream, just like before. So carbon dioxide is taken out of cells into the bloodstream, and then blood returns back to the right side of the heart would be the last one. So that's systemic circulation. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing kind of as what we've just kind of written before with pulmonary and coronary. Now, the only difference, guys, with systemic circulation, so thinking about blood flow running through your entire body, is the concept of need, right? So what happens is let's use the example of a cyclist. So cyclist is riding along and all of a sudden they see a big hill and they need to try and punch up that hill and try and go as hard as possible, okay? Their quads, their glutes, their hamstrings, their calf muscles have been using oxygen, right? But all of a sudden now there's a much bigger need for oxygen in the quads and the calves and the glutes and the hammies, right? So the body will sense that. So as the oxygen, as the blood flow is going into the quadriceps, the muscles are sending a signal back to the bloodstream saying, we need more oxygen, right? So then the body's going to give oxygen preferentially to those muscles and not other muscles. Does that make sense? It should be very kind of intuitive. Obviously, like a cyclist doesn't need a lot of blood flow going to his arms. A cyclist needs lots of blood flow, lots of oxygen going to his legs, which is why when you train certain muscles in a gym, you get a blood flow, they pump up, they get swell up, they get full of blood flow, full of oxygen, okay? That's the concept. Now, remember, because you've only got a certain amount of oxygen and a certain amount of blood flowing through your body, there's a couple of options. Either we give all the blood to your quads, or we take the blood away from other areas, or we breathe faster and our heart rate pumps faster to supply more blood to speed up the whole system. And that obviously should make sense, right? That's why our heart rate goes up. That's why we breathe harder when we have to work harder, because we're essentially delivering more oxygen to our working muscles, okay? So, for example, if you are cycling up a hill, your body's putting all the blood into your muscles, and I guarantee you it's taking blood away from other areas of your body that aren't necessary, such as your digestive system. Yeah? Okay? So it's going to be really hard for you to cycle up a hill and eat a meal at the same time and to digest that meal, right? Because the blood flow for your digestive system and your muscles are competing with each other. That's why we always say when you're training, before and after training, you want to choose food that's really easily digested, really easily absorbed, or even during workouts, Gatorades and gels and carbs and all that sort of stuff. Because it's really easy for your body to digest, so you don't have to waste blood flow and energy to your guts, and you can keep the blood flow and energy in your muscles. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all a concept on what part of the body needs it the most. Yeah. Okay. And then we will increase the demand to service that part of the body. All right. So that's the concept of sort of systemic blood flow and circulation. Okay. All right. So let's move on. 5.4. Okay. So we've kind of touched on this a little bit. So what happens? How and why does exercise intensity increase heart rate during exercise? Okay, so a few things. What do we need? We need more energy for muscle contraction. Yeah, okay. So there's an increase in energy requirements for muscle contraction. That would be my first point. Therefore, there's an increase in oxygen requirement. Because again, oxygen provides a lot of energy for our body, for our exercise, specifically at lower intensities. Okay. Therefore, heart rate and breathing rates will increase to match the demand placed on it by the muscles. Okay, so just like what I explained before. So see if you can try and explain that concept of matching the demand in your own words here, okay? I'll give you guys all just a minute or two just to try and explain this. I'd really like to see this one in your own words, see if you can understand these concepts, okay? Then just pull yourself off mute and ask me if you've got any questions. I'll just wait a minute here, okay? If anybody needs help, you should be able to see my my screen here. So it's all based on demand, yeah? All right. Does anybody have any issues with this question? Can I get a thumbs up from everyone just to make sure if we're okay here? I'll just wait. Yep, sweet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yep.
Guys, yeah, Jack. Yep. Miles, Star. Yep, good. Okay, sweet, guys. Excellent. All right. So, yeah, so that's just the concept. Okay. So, breathing rates and heart rates will increase, obviously, due to the increased oxygen demand of those specific muscles. Okay. And then that's a short-term effect, but then long-term effect, as the body becomes more and more efficient at using oxygen, at improving the size of our heart, improving our lung function, the heart rates will actually lower. Yeah. So one of the big things that we see with people that get fitter is their resting heart rate becomes lower. And the reason why that happens is at rest, the body's becoming more efficient, so the body doesn't have to work as hard to maintain its normal everyday function. So it's a really good measure of tracking your physical fitness is watching your heart rate drop. Yeah. And actually what happens is also during exercise, so let's say you're running a 1K time trial, and at the start of the season, you're 170, 175, 180 beats per minute the whole time, right? And then as you become fitter, for the same time, now your heart rate's going to be 160, 155, 150, because basically you become more efficient at sending oxygen to those muscles and using it, etc. Okay. Okay, 6.1, guys. So now we're looking a little bit at the digestive system here. Okay, and let's try and just bash through this one pretty quickly. There are quite a few interesting things in regards to the digestive system that I'll kind of spend a lot more time on. Okay, but let's just go through and see how much of this we can churn out. All right, so let's start with 1. Okay, so number 1 there is the stomach. Okay, pretty straightforward. What the stomach is, it's essentially just a sac, a muscular sac. It's a sac that's covered in muscle. It's a smooth muscle that churns and breaks down food. Okay, think of your stomach like a washing machine. So all the food that you eat and that goes into your stomach, your body's going to churn it and spin it and break it down. Okay. Now, inside the stomach is a very acidic environment, highly acidic. Okay, it's good. We have this gastric acid, these gastric juices. Okay, and what that does, it helps to break down the food further. Okay, so I would say for stomach, a muscular sac that churns and breaks down food and releases gastric acids that helps with digestion, helps to break the food down. Remember, the role of your digestive system is to start with the mouth, is to break things down to the smallest possible size so that it can be absorbed at the end. Okay, so that's the stomach. Okay, very highly acidic environment, yeah? All right. The second one is the esophagus. Okay, so the esophagus, the OESOPHAGUS. It's basically a channel between the mouth and the stomach. Pretty straightforward, yeah? So that's where food goes down. Okay, it's number 2, the esophagus. So it's a tube or channel between the mouth and the stomach. Okay, now number 3 is the liver. All right, so the liver plays a really important role in digestion. Okay, the major role of the liver in digestion is to produce something that's called bile, B-I-L-E. Okay, bile. Now, what the bile is a salt, and what bile helps us to do is to break down fat. Okay, so the liver produces bile, which gets released when you eat a fatty meal to help break down fats. Okay, there's an area of the liver that bile is stored, and it's called the gallbladder. Okay, and that's a little portion of the gallbladder that you can see just underneath there on your screen, that little sort of yellowy, greeny looking thing. So the liver produces bile. The bile gets stored in the gallbladder, and then when the body senses that it's eaten food that has fat in it, then the gallbladder will release the bile. It'll go into the stomach and into the intestine. It'll help to break down those fat molecules. Okay, so that's the role of the liver in digestion. All right, everyone okay with that one? That's the liver. Yeah. Okay, so number 4 is the small intestine. Okay, probably the most important part of your digestive system in terms of absorbing food. Okay, so the role of the small intestine is to break down and absorb your macronutrients. Okay, macronutrients. So there we have 4 macronutrients within the body. Okay, we have carbohydrates, we have protein, we have fat, and we also have alcohol. Now, majority of alcohol is metabolized in the liver, but protein, carbohydrates, and fat, which are our key macronutrients, they get absorbed in the small intestine. Okay, and the small intestine releases these things called enzymes that help to break down that food to allow it to be further absorbed. Okay, so all your protein, all your carbs, and all your fats, they all get absorbed from the small intestine into your bloodstream. Okay, so protein gets absorbed as amino acids, carbohydrates gets absorbed as glycogen, which is another word for glucose. Okay, and then it can get stored either in the muscles or in the liver, and then your fats break down and they get stored as fatty acids. They get absorbed as fatty acids into the bloodstream. Okay, so the small intestine is really important, right? It plays a really important role. It's why it's really important that the food is digested properly and broken down properly before it gets into the small intestine. Otherwise, you get issues with food, not being absorbed properly. You get gastro problems. You can get sort of like irritable bowel syndrome and all that sort of stuff. Okay. Number 5, guys, is the large intestine. So if the small intestine takes out all your macronutrients, okay, then what the large intestine takes out are your micronutrients, okay? So your micronutrients are vitamins and minerals. So all your vitamins and minerals, the majority of them get absorbed in the large intestine as well as water, okay? So the body will take the water out of the food that you eat in the large intestine, okay? And what that does to your stool is it therefore makes the stool harder and forms the stool, and then the stool gets passed out and eliminated. You poop it out at the end. Okay, so big thing to understand here, guys, is small intestine takes out the macronutrients, carbs, proteins, and fats. Large intestine takes out your micronutrients, your vitamins, your minerals, and your water. Okay, so this is all assuming that your digestive system's working well, that you're chewing your food properly, you're not just swallowing your food really fast like I always do. Large chunks get into the stomach, doesn't get absorbed and digested properly. You're eating crappy food, too much junk food, too much acidic food that's causing the gastric juices in the stomach to kind of bubble up and you get reflux and heartburn. Some people have certain types of intolerances to food. So another a really common one is, for example, lactose intolerance. So if you don't produce the enzyme that breaks down lactose, which is a sugar found in milk, your body will have a really hard time absorbing that and you get bloating and cramping and gas and diarrhea, right? So your body produces a specific enzyme called lactase and that breaks down lactose, right? If your body does not produce lactase, you'll have a really hard time with milk sugars. Yeah, so you've got to switch to a lactose-free milk or a soy or an almond milk or whatever, okay? But we've all got different types of enzymes that break down the different types of foods. Okay, so that's 6.1 there. We're getting close, guys, okay? 7.1, nerves. So again, guys, this is really boring. I understand. Trust me, after when we get to the rest of it, the next couple of days, this will all kind of click together to make a little bit more sense, okay? So let's just bash out these. There's only really one part of the nerve that I think is really important to talk about, and that's number 4, but let's just go through them. So number 1 is called the dendrite, okay, guys? And if you can see my slides here, everyone see my slides? You can play along here, okay? So what the dendrites do, the dendrites just basically receive information from other cells and transmit the message to the body of the cell, okay? So you can almost understand nerves as like one nerve connects to another nerve connects to another nerve connects to another. So those little things at the end in the dendrites, they just send the signals from one nerve to another. Okay, number 2, guys, is the cell body. And that contains basically all the nucleus, the energy, and all the information for the cells. Okay, so that's number 2, which is called the cell body. Okay, if I'm moving too quick, guys, just pop off mute and just let me know. But this one's probably the least interesting slide out of all of them. Okay, there's only one thing that I'll really kind of talk about here. All right, number 3 is what we call the axon terminal. Again, you can just use my notes here, guys. Okay, so axon terminal connects the neuron to other nerves or tissues. Okay, so it's essentially the gap between nerve cells. Okay, so it's the end of the axon. And the axon is number 5, which is that long sort of strand part of the nerve. Okay, so number 3, axon terminal, connects the neuron, which is the nerve cell, to other nerves or tissues. Okay, now number 4, this is the one I will spend a little bit of time talking on. Okay, now this is called the myelin sheath. Okay, myelin is spelled M-Y-E-L-I-N, and it's a sheath. Okay, so what this is very similar to like the insulation on like a charging cable or like any electrical cable, right? The concept of having insulation around a cable is so that it allows the signal to be sent faster and more efficiently. So obviously, like your phone charging cable, you want the charging signal and the energy to be sent rapidly from one end of the cable to the other. Okay, so that's what myelin does in our body, in our nerves, is it insulates our nerves and allows the signals to go faster. Okay, so now why is this important? Well, you can have certain medical conditions where the body attacks and breaks down the myelin. Okay, so if anyone's heard of a condition called MS or multiple sclerosis, yeah, what happens here is the body's immune system will actually attack that myelin, right? And it'll wear down, it'll break it down, it'll cause scar tissue. And so then what happens is the nervous system signals end up going everywhere. And then people have all sorts of symptoms from numbness to muscle weakness to complete being in a wheelchair. Like there's obviously 100 different sort of symptoms and grades of MS. But why this is important also for strength and for sports and for performance is that every time you send a signal down that nerve, the myelin will grow a tiny bit thicker. When I talk tiny, I mean like tiny, tiny, tiny bit thicker. So the concept of constantly practicing a skill, the concept of constantly learning technique, the concept of doing a passing drill at footy over and over and over and over and over again is to insulate these nerve cells so that when we send signals down those specific nerve cells to the fingers, from the brain and whatever, the signal gets faster and faster and faster. And you guys know what it's all like. You start a skill when you were young, you couldn't do it, you couldn't send the right signals, you couldn't sequence the right joints and muscles to work together. And now you can kick a ball, catch a ball, pass, catch, whatever with your eyes closed. That's because over the years, you've insulated those nerve cells so much that the speed of the signals goes down faster and faster and faster. Okay? So that's why when training teenagers and training young people, technique and constant repetition and constant drills and doing it over and over and over again is so important, because you want to build that nervous system strength in them as quickly as you possibly can. Okay, so that's myelin. That's why I think that part of it is important, right? Learning a skill. Then number 5, guys, if you haven't already done it, is the axon, and that just conducts the signal away from the cell body to the next nerve. So that's kind of like the cord, like the charging cord, yeah. So we call that the axon. All right. How are we going there, guys? Because anyone need any more time for that one? Then we can always come back and kind of go through a little bit of this later. Okay. So last one, everybody. Last one, all right? And then we're done for today. Thank you. I appreciate your time. I know it's been a bit of a hard slog, but I promise you it all gets a lot better with this module from here, okay? So now we're looking for 2 different things. The first one is the sensory neuron, and the second ones are the motor neurons, okay? So pretty simple. Sensory is what we call motor input, okay? So these are your senses. So for example, your smell, touch, sight, taste, sound, all that sort of stuff, okay? So sensory neurons bring signals from outside to the central nervous system, okay? So right now, the sensory neurons in your ear are taking the signals from your ear canal and taking them into your brain to be processed. Okay? So that's what we call, that's sensory neurons. So they're basically bringing inputs in, they're bringing signals in. Okay, so the signals coming in from the outside into the central nervous system, which is your brain and which is your spinal cord, and they are to be processed there. Okay. All right. Now, motor neurons are the exact opposite. Okay, so the motor neuron works in reverse, and they're located in the spinal cord. And what they do is they send messages out to certain muscles and certain, things like, obviously your fingers to type right now, to facilitate motor functions and movement. Okay, so their message is going out. They're telling your body to do something, to perform something. Okay, so again, best way to explain, sensory neurons. Neurons in your eardrum are listening to the vibration of my voice. They are traveling through your eardrum into your brain. Your brain is processing, listening to what I'm saying. It's then sending signals through your motor neurons, through your spinal cord, out through your arms into your fingers to tap on your keyboard and produce the right response and essentially for you to type, right? So that's the difference between sensory, which is coming in, and motor, which is going out, which is the output neurons. Okay, and that's 7.2. And I think that is that one done. I think that's that one done. So just a second, everybody. We'll close all this down.
Can we turn that in?
Yep, if you're happy with that, everybody, let's turn that in, okay?